me and Devika and Vinu and Raja are CHRI colleagues, but one of you please do come on stage as CHRI, Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative. And Mr. Gagan Sethi from Center for Social Justice, please come on stage. And Maya, if you could also join us. And and finally, our special personality of the evening who's taken time out from a very busy schedule, Dr. Vivek Devroy. So if sorry, bit informal, which is we are an informal collective of 6 organizations, and we've been doing this since 2018. And I will not give you a overview, but for the camera and for to record this moment, I would request that our guests be provided a copy of the report so they can unveil it for the cameras, and then we will start with the presentation, which is will give you the key findings of the report. Nayanika, could you please help us? I'm sure many of you are very used to cutting ribbons, so let's just make this very quick, and so we can start with the actual program. You just have to face the audience who's patiently waiting for this moment. So, what are the India Justice Reports? Well, the report is the first ever study that holistically looks at all the 4 core pillars of the justice system through government data. The idea is to foster competition between states on improving their justice capacity. We We do this by clustering 25 states into 2 clusters based on population. So, 18 large states have population of 1 crore and above, 7 small ones, less than 1 crore population, and then there are UTs that are not ranked, and there are 3 AFSPA states that are not ranked. Data for everything is provided in the report and now also on the website. The 4 pillars, and this time the new one called the State Human Rights Commissions, which is based entirely on RTIs. These 4 pillars are divided, or let's say the data on them is collected across the themes of budgets, infrastructure, diversity, human resources, workload, and time series analysis of various indicators. In all, this year's report has more than 100 indicators, which is an addition of over 18 indicators from the previous report. All the data that we collect is from governments themselves, who report it to the central bodies, and we take it from them. Where there is no data, we do RTIs like the SHRC section. We also have received a lot of cooperation from NALSA in collecting data for successive years, and some colleagues from NALSA are also present, and we're grateful for their presence today. With that, I will hand this over to Maya to take you through the rest of the rankings and talk about who won and why and other key findings.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. DeBroy, and my colleagues on the stage. And thank you for being here. Uh, I'll get straight into it. Naturally, since this is a ranking, you will be you will want to know right up front what the rankings were, what we found, and there were quite a lot of changes this time. If you look at the screen, you will see that this time Karnataka is the state that came first or came top. Is that right? Okay. Karnataka came top, but you will see that it came top from being 14th last time. So that's quite a considerable improvement. The improvement, I'll talk a little bit about the improvement afterwards. And then Tamil Nadu came, and Telangana, Gujarat, which has been consistently not, going upwards, and Andhra Pradesh and Kerala. So you'll see that apart from Gujarat, which is a western state, that the southern states are somehow managing a better performance, or better, not performance indicators, but better capacity indicators of the justice system and the subsystems therein. And then in the middle, the sort of lilac kind of uh, colors, they have stayed, they've moved up and down a little bit, but stayed in the middle. But the last 3 or 4 states, which are approximately account for 450 million people, or 45 crore, are getting are having to cope with deep capacity deficits in delivering justice. Now, this is the big states. The small states, among the small states, they really are small, and so it's easier for them. But still, the indicators are not so brilliant. And Sikkim came first after being second a couple of times. But I won't go into all of the states, but you see that Goa has been consistently going down, which is really a pity because they were first not even 2.5, 3 years ago. So these are indicators which you then have to disaggregate and say, well, which sections of them, what was it about them that made these changes happen? So what is it? We're looking for budgets, and budgets set the tune. We're always complaining about the justice system, but how much do we as a people actually expend on the budget system? Per capita expense on the budget system. Now you look and see the long lines are police, and they get almost 15 times more than any of the other pillars. The judiciary, the prisons, and then you can see legal aid. Can you even see how little they get? So what the expenditure comes to is really less than 4 rupees for legal aid. For prisons, it's around 42, and for judiciary, it's about 146, and for police, it's over 1,000. Now, I'm not offering you a judgment on whether this is good or whether this is bad. I'm merely saying that this is what the status is. And if you look at, if I can take you to the next slide, well, you'll see on average for 1151, you can get a nice phone, or you can get 6 hamburgers, or you can get the spend on policing per person. Now, that is the one part of the subsystem which is so many times more than the rest of it. But the question on the bottom of the thing, which is which one do you think gets most bang for the buck? I don't want you to answer that question, and certainly not aloud. So think about it, but don't say a word. Okay. So nationally, what does the justice system have to cope with in terms of being people who work within the justice system? Vacancies everywhere, since there is a charge on the budget, and nine tenths of a budget, 8/10 of a budget is spent on salaries, recruitment, and manpower or human resources are restricted. And across the board, if you look at the little circle, about across the board there are 22% vacancies. Now, since the last time that we did the report, vacancies in police have increased at the constabulary level, but decreased at the officer level. Prison staff have decreased quite substantially. Well, not quite substantially, but 2%, which is not saying a great deal. The High Court vacancies have come down. I beg your pardon. High Court vacancies and subordinate court vacancies have, I'm reading it wrong, I'm sorry. High Court vacancies have come down, subordinate court vacancies have gone up. And the DLSA vacancies have gone up. Now, I want to let me talk to you a little bit about police manpower. And I say this word with deliberation, manpower. Over time, money has increased threefold and manpower 22%. But still, we have a low police to population ratio. It is used to be 156 and now it is 153. And this is counting the district police, the civil police, the reserve armed police, and the Indian Reserve battalions. So police vacancies now hover around 20%. But the worrying part is that the most vacancies are in the investigative and supervisory categories. So you have this large cohort of police, but in the critical areas of supervision and investigation, you have large vacancies as you are seeing them here. So we have, how do we count the numbers of police? I just mentioned the categories that we count as civilian police. When you think of police, you think of people in uniform who will be in charge of your safety, security, who will apprehend criminals, who will prevent crime. In the BPR&D, they categorize police by rank. And then there is a column called others, if any. And this time the report investigated what others, if any, mean. Others, if any, usually is talking about temporary staff, ministerial staff, sweepers, computer people, runners, and people who generally support policing, but who are not actually inducted into the police. So these others, this category is growing all across the country. Now, should that be a matter of concern? Should it not be a matter of concern? That I leave to you. But it grew from 1.2% to now 5%, which means a lakh or a little bit more than a lakh. And Haryana, I believe, has got, am I right on that? Haryana has got the largest. Haryana has got a large percentage, and Andhra Pradesh has got another large percentage and has gone from 0 to 33%. One of the curious things is that the others category has got 15,000 newly recruited women who are known as the Mahila police. This is still under challenge, but it is a sort of liaison group which is there for to help the community to to be liaison between the community and the police where women are concerned, where issues related to women are concerned. But since they are called that, it gives the impression of being much more diverse than it is. And because this is a national phenomenon and a growing one, you get a sense of people and being called police wearing some type of uniform, even if it is a different type of uniform, and for the ordinary people to think of these people as police when in fact they are sort of quasi police. So a plea, even though I say that people that there are less police people than is generally believed to be so, this is not a plea for more policemen, but for the rational deployment, better training, better availability for resources at the police station level, so that there's genuine help and availability of police at the police station level. Let me take you to another subsection, which is the number of judges. There are today 20,000 plus judges, and this is counting the judges in the Supreme Court. And there are 4.9 crore cases pending. Cases, then, if you just do a simple division, I am not doing a division of what kind of cases there are, whether they're civil or criminal, whether they will take a long time or a short time. I'm just saying, for an ordinary person, this is what it looks like. Cases pending per High Court judge is 6,000 and over in 2017, and now 6,900, really touching 7,000 in 2022. And cases pending for the subordinate court is 1,600 in 2017, going to 2022, 2.2 thousand in 2022. There are too many twos in that for me to get my tongue around. So, what does it say? At the High Court, at the national level, to go from initiation to determination will take 7 years in the High Court. In Uttar Pradesh, it will take an average of 15 years. This is a caseload that is not possible to fulfill humanly. So it is no good constantly blaming judges or saying that they take too much leave or that they're too lazy or they're too elite. This can't be done by anybody. So here I'm pointing out not only judges' vacancies, but if you look at staff vacancies, support staff vacancies, one court clerk missing means there will be further delay. So there is a plea for, and my colleagues who do this work on the judiciary will talk about this perhaps, there is a plea for having a permanent high class court administrator. This is a profession which is in all sorts of other countries, which takes care of the court management, and the court management doesn't become a burden on a judge whose training is really to adjudicate. It is not to run his court. So let me take you to now prison and correctional prisons. Prisons are now in a, this is where all of the dysfunction and difficulties and shortages in the judicial system, in the justice system, come to roost. It comes to roost on the prisoner, it comes to roost on the administration. The administration is extremely short-handed. There are about 35% vacancies here. And the vacancies, there are several cadres in the prisons. There is the guarding cadre, there is the correctional cadre, and there is the medical cadre. I won't go through all of them, but just to talk about the medical cadre, which bothers me a lot. because medical officers have actually, since the last report, gone from 34% vacancies to 48% vacancies. There are there are supposed to be 300 inmates for every doctor. In fact, there are one doctor may serve up to 800 or 900 people. And you see that in Uttarakhand, they are serving 23 times the benchmark of one doctor for 300 people. Now, this is in prisons which are overcrowded. And we are never going to get doctors of one for 300 because there is a general shortage of doctors in the country. A great deal of the doctors that are there in the country are actually concentrated in Maharashtra. And then the rest are concentrated across the country, mostly in urban areas. So, how are you going to get doctors for the prisons? What do you do about this? You can't just say we're not going to have healthcare or doctors in prisons. There is a great case to be made for paramedics to be trained from within convicts, from within people who are interested in this kind of thing, and for staff to be trained in paramedical work so that you can have a modicum of hygiene, preventive, and emergency uh, services in prisons. So there there is also the question of women. There are women there are women prisoners all across the country. Uttar Pradesh has the most women prisoners, about 5,000 of them, and records only 3 female medical officers across all prisons. The data that is collected about prisons and prison doctors does not say whether they are whether they are Ayurvedic doctors, whether they are allopathic doctors, whether they are full time, whether they are part time, whether they are suitable for that kind of work at all. So, and going further, uh, so what is the outcome of all of this is that we have these enormous crowded prisons. There used to be uh, the prison capacity used to be about 3,20,000 in 2010. It has gone to lakhs 25,000. But if you look at the chart, you will see that the capacity is going up in a sort of thin slide upwards. But the actual occupancy has gone up very sharply to 5,500. Now, this is on a day. This is not the turnover. The turnover is far greater. And then you have the national occupancy rate between 2020 and 2021 has gone up. Now, this has gone up during a period of COVID for reasons to do with the COVID, but at the same time, undeniably gone up. More than half of the prison in 23 states are overcrowded. Now, the UN has a category called severe and called extreme. A great many of our prisons are in the category of extreme, which is over 150% overcrowding. Now, how is this overcrowding? Who is in these prisons? 77% of all of the people who are in prison today, and that again is a number that is up from 68%, are under trials. Under trials who are waiting their investigations to be finished or waiting for their trials to be finished. And they are having to wait a longer and longer period before they can get out of jail. It's not that everybody doesn't get bail, they do get bail. But presently, the conditions of giving a bail are such that they don't chime with the socio-economic background of people who are in jail. You are asking them for permanent residence. Many of them are migrants. You are asking them for assurances, cash assurances, or guarantees, and they have no social capital nor any money to go to anybody to do this. Judges are giving bail, but they are also refusing bail when conditions cannot be met. But the conditions themselves are such that they are not possibly going to be met. So, I want to take you to who gets justice and do you get it evenly? Yeah. Oh, sorry, we've got to go to infrastructure. I've got something completely different in front of me. Okay, let me go to infrastructure. Infrastructure, we have not looked at all the infrastructure available to police, prisons, legal aid, and judiciary. But we have looked at some of it. Now, there is one court hall available for every judge today, those who are sitting. But if all the judges' vacancies were filled, you would find yourself again with a shortfall of judges. You have uh, CCTV cameras. 73% police stations are equipped with CCTV cameras, at least one. Now, we asked for this because of the Paramveer Singh judgment, which says that police stations must have a specific number of CCTV cameras. They must have specific capacities. They must have night vision, audio visual. They must be 18, uh, 18 months of recording, 18 months of recording, and so on. Now, we don't know the quality of the, we asked for this under the RTI, but we don't know the quality. We don't know how many there are. And in some states, there's only, the record says, there's only one police station with one camera. It was Rajasthan, no? It was in Rajasthan. Now, I just want to point out that this all information was given to us through the RTI or through the affidavits that have been given to the court. But somehow I feel that the data itself is not correct or not up to date. And this distortion of data is also giving you a distorted figure, which can be very detrimental to the ranking of these states in the justice report. So there is a strong argument that states should also give data which is verifiable, validated, and goes through a process of validation so that when people like us come to looking at things, and not only people like us, but policymakers, how does a policymaker, which is looking at a distorted data set, actually come to a decision which will then take him forward in a proper way? So, but things have improved also. 72% of all police stations now have women's desks. On the other hand, if the MHA's 2013 uh, government order or advisory was to be followed, you would have to have 10 women constables and 3 SI level women in a police station. Now, the number of police women in the police are not enough to do that. Unless you divided the whole thing and just dish them out like cards. But they are specific to states. And a state that has 2% or 5% women is not going to be able to fulfill that. VC categories, video conferencing categories, coverage in prisons has increased also. But here I want to put a caveat. You may have increased it to 84%, but has it had the outcome of more consultation with representatives? Has it had the outcome of shortening trials? Has it had the outcome of more family visits? This we do not know. So, and court complexes, of course, have taken in a great way to technology. And the Chief Justice is constantly exhorting more and more of this. Whether the software is good enough, whether the uptake is good enough, that time will tell. But for the moment, there is a willingness to go to technology to simplify processes. Sorry. Next, thank you. So now looking at whether justice is equally available to everybody. Thank you so much. Is so when I say this, I'm talking about the rural urban divide. If you look at the chart, Orgo, if you could just point to Kerala. Yeah, Kerala, because of its topography, because of its population spread, which is pretty even, police stations in rural areas and in urban areas are almost the same. So there is the hope of equal access to a police station or to legal aid for that matter. But everywhere else where you see the topography is different, Rajasthan, for instance, or MP, for instance, there you have much more concentration of policing presence than in the rural areas. Now, why is this a matter of concern? For me, the matter of concern is simply this, that if I am a woman in Barmer and I have a situation where I need the police, will I get her as easily as if I am a woman in central Jaipur? For us, in a democracy, justice institutions must be available to everybody in an equal way. And this is not the case at the moment. There is logic in where police stations are placed, there is logic where legal aid is given, or perhaps there is not. But what I'm saying is that we do not come close to the ideal of having access in an equal way. Since we last did the last report, there has been an issue about legal aid clinics. Legal aid clinics are required to be in every cluster of villages. This is to give legal awareness, counseling, access to rights, and an understanding of rights and referral services. But the the Legal Aid Authority has decided, for many sensible reasons, to reduce legal aid clinics from 1 in 42 to 1 in 127. In a place like Chhattisgarh, it is reported that there is only one legal aid clinic at that grassroots level for the whole state. Again, is this data or is this reality? But you see where I'm going with this, that people who need it the most, people who are semi literate, people who are literate or far away from other resources, are not getting the benefit of knowing their legal rights, or even their legal duties, or even the constitution, or even how they should be dealing with each other in a relationship. Now, let me come to diversity. Have we got diversity? Yeah. Diversity. There's a long way to go on this. Justice institutions must be just in themselves. They must be able to demonstrate justice. And demonstration of justice is representation. In a country as diverse as us, you should have caste, religious, and gender diversity. This is the table of where the women are and also where the caste is. Karnataka is the only state where the police have fulfilled all three caste categories only in the police. Everywhere else, these categories are not fulfilled. And this is after decades of statutory quotas. Now, women don't have statutory quotas, but the conversation about women has had an uptick and whether they are included or not. And you see that they are always at the lower ends, whether it is constabulary, whether it is high court judges, but you will see that in the subordinate courts, they are doing quite well at 35%. So, going further to, yes. Now, this was something new that we did, the state human rights commissions. There are 25 of them all across the country. And all of the deficits that you find typically across the justice system are typified in the state human rights commissions. The total vacancies are at 44%. 11 state human rights commissions have investigative staff between 1 and 5. And in Jharkhand and Manipur and the other states, there are no investigative staff. Between all of the state human rights commissions, there are hardly any women at all. And you see the amount of money that they are given. NHRC has 62 crores for the year. Between 25 state human rights commission, they have 105 allocation for all 25. Go forward. So again, here it is. This is how much you spend if you look at the per capita spend. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think I've gone on a little too long, but I don't want to end and make you sad and say that everything is bad. I want to show you a slide which indicates, now this is the good news. Here is a slide that shows that people are making efforts, states are making efforts, and you can see that out of 60 indicators, a state like Karnataka, Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, Orissa, Punjab have made efforts which show improvements in 43 and 43 and a little bit less. Even the worst states that have only got 20, made improvements only in 20 have actually made improvements. The share of women is steadily rising and it has become rapid, but it's all too slow. Another thing that I want to mention is that when we started the India Justice Report, no state could reach even 5 out of 10 on our indicators. Now, at least 3 or 4 states have gone to 6 and 6 and above, 6 out of 10, which is good. But as I said, it is all too slow. And the people who are suffering from that are the citizens who need who need justice at their doorstep. As my colleague in the morning said, just like you have a health clinic or a school, you must be able to access a justice institution in your place of locality. These are some nudges. I won't go through all of them. And some things that could be done immediately to improve. But our policymakers are common sense people and they do know what to improve and what not to improve. This is a justice report that points to a direction and can give you the low hanging fruit. One thing I want to say before I end is that this is not a critique of the government. This is a mirror to the government. If the mirror is distorted, the distortion is because of the data. When the data is perfected, you will get a mirror within which you can see the man in the mirror. And if he's not good, then you have to change his ways. Thank you.
Yeah. Uh, Thanks very much, Maya, for that comprehensive presentation. And first up, I'd like to congratulate Maya, Valay, Nayanika, Rehana, Lakwinder, and everyone else who's been associated with the India Justice Report. This is a hat trick of publications. This is the third one that's come out. Um, and it covers the time of COVID, where, as we all know, access to justice had become an even scarcer commodity than it is. And I hope that with this, it becomes clear that the India Justice Report is a mainstay of the justice system, that everyone interested in the justice system can look towards every couple of years. So, Maya, I hope that you and the team can keep the flag flying high and keep pointing or showing the justice system the mirror that it needs to see. Uh, I've been asked to facilitate a short discussion amongst those on the stage who have all been associated with the report or with data based analysis of the justice system in one way or the other over the course of the last number of years, and to take a couple of questions from the audience as well, if there are any. And after that, we have saved the best for the last, and Dr. Bibek Debroy will give his address. Uh, so, Dr. Debroy, if I could start with a question to you. You've worked on data and the judiciary and the legal system for a very long period of time. I remember as a student, I used to look at your work in relation to limbs. That was really one of the early times when we were looking at data based systems in the legal system. So, what I wanted to ask you, now that you've looked at the India Justice Report, which its four pillars, and now the addition of the State Human Rights Commission, what happens with data like this? So when we see that a state like Karnataka has come on top, elections are due in the state of Karnataka, do we see that the government saying that the justice system is one where we have improved significantly, and here the India Justice Report is testament to that fact? So how can this data be used to effectuate real, meaningful change? Okay, certainly. So I will hold you to that. That also saves me a bit of time to ask questions to the others. So that's great. And all of us here have been involved with the India Justice Report in some shape or form. So Gagan, I'll start with you. This the India Justice Report third edition covers the period of the pandemic as well, and the period of the pandemic has been a huge setback as far as access to justice is concerned, for obvious reasons. What do you think are the key takeaways from this report in terms of recovering after the pandemic as far as the justice system is concerned?
No, in a sense, I'll just come to the link of the whole thing. The bottom at the, I don't want to say bottom, at the cutting edge level, you have the legal aid clinics, and then you have the paralegal volunteers, and then you have the DLSA, or the District Legal Service Authority. And I think there's where we have seen actually an underspend, a decline, both in numbers and in the access of it. And it can be easily seen from a simple indicator which we've looked at in terms of practice, that you had almost up to 26 crore migrant workers moving during COVID. And each of them had grievances on their entitlements, etc. But when we actually approached the DLSA, they didn't even know that there was a role for them in that, when actually in the Act there is a role for them. And there were some states like Chhattisgarh and all that who said, how we didn't know. So we said, this year, states like Gujarat said, help us. But many other states said, not our job. Now, I think the critical this thing is that when you're spending, as Maya put, just about 4 rupees, which is not even a cup of tea, in legal services, and the very act which says it is also part of the educational system. It's just not about service when you get legal aid, but part of the duty bearer of this thing is to explain what your rights are. It is not possible. And therefore, on the other hand, the link, which I think is very important, there is budgets, but no takeaways. So the budgets are lapsing, and big, if you look at the report, says unutilized budgets are there in many states. Some states have utilized it fully. I think if you put it all together, and maybe Vivek can answer that is the thing, should we have a better monitoring dashboard on all these 100 indicators, choose maybe 60 of them across the four pillars, and then see that those indicators are actually operative and monitor them at a central level, and go further where the states have that capability to monitor them at the state level and look at it in an integrative way rather than just looking at the pillar. Because I think access to justice is not silos, it's all interrelated, which I think Maya was explaining.
Yeah, and I think Gagan, that's really the core philosophy of the India Justice Report, that we can't think of justice in silos as the judiciary or the police separately, which is how a lot of research has gone on, but we need to see them in this integrated fashion. And Vijay, if I could turn to you, as a result of the pandemic, one of the things that we have seen happen, which Maya also pointed to, is a significant increase in the under trial population from 68%, which is high enough and bad enough to begin with, to 77, 78%. And obviously that has the reasons for that are not far to see with what Gagan was also saying, that the district legal services authorities don't see this as part of their job. It's no surprise that under trial populations in prisons are piling up. What is it that you think that needs to be done? The problem is an endemic one, but also a more acute one.
Yeah. So actually, the main reason why the numbers went up is actually quite a no-brainer. That during the COVID period, the courts had almost stopped functioning as far as criminal courts were concerned, except for urgent bail hearings. There were no trials taking place, and people were just there for a couple of years. Everything had come to a standstill, and that is clearly showing both in terms of the the increase in the occupancy rate, which has gone up from 22% to from 122% to 130%, and the under trial population, which was around 69% to now about 77%. So, what has really happened during this period is that the number of people who are awaiting trial has increased drastically. And if one needs to look at what needs to be done, uh, I think that one of the main things is that you need to look at a more liberal bail system, because unless and until it is not going to be possible to complete and conduct all these trials in a very fast manner because of the issues that Maya has also pointed out in terms of the infrastructure available, human resources available as far as the judiciary is concerned. And therefore, in my opinion, the one way to deal with this issue is to get more and more people out on bail. And this is something that the Supreme Court is repeatedly talking about. But when you look at the lower court level, what one finds is an extreme reluctance on the part of lower court judges, magistrates, to release people on bail. In fact, conditions are getting more and more strict as we find at the grassroots level. Magistrates are asking for ID proof documents, they're asking for residence proof documents, they are increasing. I'll just tell you one case that we came across in Maharashtra where we are working. There was a case of a person who was in prison for 9 months for, a dispute which was because of a fight between two people over 10 rupees. Another case where a person was in prison for almost a year, where it was the allegation was stealing a buffalo. So there are, I mean, these are stories that you hear about, but these actually cases are still happening in the country. So, and what was the bail amount in that one case where the dispute was over 10 rupees, 15,000 rupees? So it just doesn't make sense. Why are we spending so much? If you look at the amount of expenditure that you do on keeping a prisoner inside, it's a big amount of money. Leave alone the fact that the person is getting more and more criminalized. You are in that position for so many months and years. So it defies logic as to why our judges think this way. Probably it's because they are worried about pendency of cases, because they're worried that if the person goes out on bail, he or she may not come back on court dates, and that will increase their pendency, and which is being monitored by the higher courts. So we need to really find a different way of looking at bail, and along with that, improve the legal aid system. Now, the NALSA has come up with a new scheme called the Legal Aid Defense Council scheme, and it's being implemented now in phases. And these lawyers will be different from the earlier system. There will be full-time lawyers with paying decent salaries. So we have to wait and watch how things.
I think on a lighter note, I have a friend who practices in the Punjab and Haryana High Court whose visiting card earlier said specializes in criminal appeals. Now it just says specializes in bail, because that's really all the hearings that you get now at the High Court at a regular basis. So it's a really sad state of affairs, and I think it's heightened by the fact, and Leah, I'll turn to you with this, that the data from the India Justice Report also shows that the case clearance rate amongst high courts and lower courts is also decreasing. That is, the amount of time that it is taking for a judge to dispose of a case is also increasing. So cases are pending within the system for a longer period of time. How do you think we can start thinking about addressing some of this? One part is vacancies, which we've discussed, but what else can we think about to address something like this?
Yeah, so of course, one part is vacancies, but there are also systemic issues within the judiciary that lead to this kind of pendency and backlog. And sometimes when we just look at vacancies alone, we tend to not go behind the scenes and look at those factors. So there are a lot of administrative inefficiencies within the justice system that lead to this level of backlogs. And as everyone has pointed out, COVID-19 made everything worse. Courts were mostly shut during the first two phases of the lockdown, and only urgent hearings were taken up. So we had a backlog at that stage of about around 3 point something crores. Now we are looking at close to 5 crores. So the business as usual is not going to work anymore, and we really need to look at how we can clear a majority of these cases quite fast. What can help, we think, is technology, and to use technology for the administrative functions, for the procedural functions, not to replace judges with technology, but there are a lot of mundane tasks within the judicial system that technology can be used for. For example, scheduling. Any lawyer you speak to will tell you how chaotic the process of listing cases is. A judge will list 100 cases but will hear only 80, will hear only 20, 80 will be adjourned. So there is a lot of room for intelligent scheduling, calendarization. These things can really help judges process cases faster. In the morning, I had also spoken about removing administrative tasks from the judge's mandate. A judge is a specialist whose job is adjudication, and they should not be stuck with procedural tasks and admin work. So these are some of the things that can be done to clear backlog.
Thanks very much, Leah. And I think that's a neat segue to move to Devyani. And questions around the police. A lot of it have to do with a lot of the problems have to do with the fact that we expect a policeman or a policewoman to do a whole range of jobs, and we think of them as, in the popular imagination, you think of them as enforcing law and order, doing some investigation, but the actual task itself is fairly administrative and clerical in terms of what they have to do. And if we look at training budgets, which is something that the India Justice Report points out, the training budgets for police is woeful. And you're talking about the maximum is, I think, Vipul, correct me if I'm wrong, about 3% of the budget in Telangana, and West Bengal is close to 0%. And if you're not going to train policemen and women, but you're expecting them to perform certain tasks very efficiently. So, how do we look at improving capacity, particularly of policemen and women, to be able to do the functions that the law expects them to perform?
One of the driving goals for IGR is actually to engage with data on parameters that we consider foundational, so that we can engage with planning processes on each of these aspects. And so when you're talking about capacity, what stands out in the case of police is the gaps in the sense of fluctuations that we see year on year. So in one year, one state may improve capacity, may improve or may reduce vacancy, and has recruited. But then, the subsequent years that state falls because the recruitment typically takes 2 to 3 years. The cycle takes 2 to 3 years to complete. So how do we look at fluctuations then in the planning process? Is vacancy being determined for the subsequent years as well when they are notified? How are the sanction strengths being determined? How frequently are they being looked at? I think these are some of the fundamental questions that need better answers from institutions. Because ultimately, any improvement, any reform, any modernization, any use of technology, all of this will work on this foundation. And if this foundation has these persistent gaps so many years after independence, I think that those are issues that have to be addressed straight up. We keep talking about vacancies, but really we don't get answers as to why they persist when there's a budget sanction for it, when there's a sanction strength. We're not even looking at whether sanction strength is adequate. We're just asking why they are not met. So that's one issue. So planning, so really the IGR effort is to point out the gaps in planning and then see how we can input into it, and how we can engage with it. And the other thing that stands out when we engage with policy issue is how the conversation on policy does not trickle down the rank. So when you're speaking to officers, in the police stations or at district level, so removed from any discussion on any of modernization discussion or policy discussion. So I think that is something that also we want to bring out through research that gets that comes out of IJR, so that issues of capacity become far more meaningful, for both officers and the public.
Vipul, last word on the panel to you. Uh, the IJR looks at the capacity to deliver justice. We know that the capacity is only the foundation. There's a long way to go before that capacity translates actually into justice. So, what do you think needs to be done to ensure that the last man in the queue or the last woman in the queue, last person in the queue, gets justice on the basis of the foundations that we have?
I think attitudes, and the missing point that we have probably shied away. Probably, since we are talking about data, we do not want to tackle politics of it. One is that the police is the best thing that a politician wants to have. It is they work for the rulers of the day, like the private armies of the politicians. And this is one thing that the politicians don't want to let go of. And this is one part. The other part of the attitude is chalta hai attitude, where things that there are a certain level of things which you would say you should do. There are certain things you must do. There are certain things you'll go to jail if you don't do. You know, say something like a Supreme Court judgment which you are violating year after year for 16 years. I mean, how long can you do that in a democratic state which is run by rule of law? So, Prakash Singh judgment, for instance, 6 states have completely, kind of nearly completely, because there are caveats here and there, have followed it. Another 6 have partly done it. Another 7 states have, in principle, accepted that they are going to do it, but 16 years, then, I mean, there's no indication when this is going to happen. So, are we going to do it? Is it going to happen? Similarly, Maya mentioned Paramveer Singh judgment, where we know that the entire country is under surveillance. There are like billions of terabytes of data which is being collected by way of CCTV cameras every day, everywhere. But then there is a Paramveer Singh judgment which says that there should be CCTV cameras inside police stations. Now, this is something that you are mandated to do it. This is your obligation. You can't do if and but in this, because there should be accountability of the cops. There should be in all their entry exit points, in their interrogation rooms, in their daily work. There should be CCTV camera coverage, and there should be 18 months of footage should be. So these are issues. The other thing is that there is we understand that the states have their capacities and the states also have their cultures and their own benchmarks. Now, it's one thing to say that yes, I mean all states should do it, but states do have their cultures. Now, Gujarat and Rajasthan, adjoining states, have vastly different cultures. You know, one place, one state, you would find fake police encounters very common. Another state, not common at all. You know, so I mean, these are cultures which some of these can be called, and Dr. Vivek Devroy will tell us more if possible. So there are things which can be seen to be ossified, you know, like the patterns and practices year after year, decade after decade, where the cases are not filed. You walk into a police station and it is impossible to file an FIR. You know, there is a Lalita Kumari judgment there also. You can, you know, it's impossible to get bail at the police station level. Why? I mean, there is a process in which, in certain kind of cases, you should get bail. So I think an attitude change and some kind of, I think, hiatus in the kind of political scheme of things, where you know some kind of freedom or some kind of systems built in a certain way that the accountability of the police comes before their direct supervision by the political class.
Oh, that's right. And I think the politics of the question is the big elephant in the room. But in this room, as in we've got many distinguished people, and Valai tells me that we've got about 5 minutes for questions. So I would urge you to keep your question, introduce yourself, keep your questions a bit short. We'll take one quick round and then answer them before we hear Professor Debroy's remarks. So 1, 2, and 3, and 4. Yeah, we'll take these. Is there a mic that can go around, please? Yeah. We'll just take them all together to the second row. Yeah. Oh, we can give it to Mr. Rathi and then we can go.
Hello, good evening. My name is S.S. Rathi. Uh, as a career, I am a judge. I've been on bench. I'm on the bench for last 25 years, and I met Mayaji in 2018. Perhaps the first report was in Reckoning, and I was serving as sorry director Nalsa. And when I came to know that this kind of report is being published, so it was a welcome decision, and we cooperated a lot. Now, as far as this report, which has come up, the third edition, I'm so happy. But one take, I'll make three quick points, is when we say justice in India, one of the biggest stakeholder is the victim. And I think I will go through the report, but in these slides, I did not find any mention of the victim. Now, victim is very important because our primary focus perhaps is on the criminal justice system. And 3/4 of all the pendency of 4.9, which comes to around 3.75 crores, are only criminal cases. And the victimology is something which is very close to my heart, being a judge. And I dealt with the Nirbhaya's case. I was serving as special secretary with Delhi State Authority in 2012 December, when government of Delhi said ki Mr. Rathi, we need to give her some money, and the Delhi victim scheme did not have a provision of interim compensation. So we should do some work on that also. We are only focusing on people in jail. Yes, they are also part of our responsibility. So this is one part. Now, second is we are all dealing with trials, 3.75 crore trials, and we are working for expediting trial. So my take is different. When we are not able to reach the destination. Maybe we are going in a wrong direction. We have to see whether our GPSs are fine. Why we need a trial? Justice doesn't need a trial. You check any other democracy or any other European example, they go only 5 to 7% cases go on trial. They have a robust pre-litigation. We can call them plea bargaining. Now, our plea bargaining starts post charge sheet. I have talked about this a lot of time. We put everything to trial. I'll give you a very, very small example.
Just a little briefly, because Mr.
Yes, just
Debroy also has.
30 seconds.
Yes.
And anything and everything goes for trial. I think we have to segregate that. We have heard of a case of Nitish Katara murder case. I did an inquiry, cost of trial on exchequer. In that one trial, which I did as an officer of the court on the asking of DB, that one case costed 5.8 crore rupees to exchequer. So this is, we are bleeding money on trials. So we have to segregate deadwood from the trials. We have to do that. And lastly, we have to use technology. We are not monitoring our trials. This system is clogged by cases. Like in medical systems, anybody who walks into the hospital is not to be sent to ICU. So I consider trial as a surgery. Everybody is not, or an ICU patient. We have OPDs, we have people who have a day house, so we can avoid trial. I think we have to work on policy on criminal trial, expediting bails, and these things are not going to give a lasting result. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rathi. You'll get the boy in the black T-shirt there, and then blue in front. Yeah.
Hello. My name is Rohit Sharma, and I have previously worked on MP Migrant Report and NHS Diversity Report. Currently, I am working on an initiative called Awaz, which aims to democratize social legal discourse in 12 languages. So this is like a suggestion. If you guys want to translate this report in multiple languages or want to incorporate multiple languages in next report, I'll be happy to volunteer for this. And we hope to engage other authorities through multiple languages. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah. There's one here. You could just pass it forward, Danika.
Well, honored to be among such august gathering, Honorable Judge and Honorable members on the dais. I am answer to your ma'am. So I've studied criminal justice administration. Someone who is to be nominated between judge and a lawyer, just to sort out the process. I have a word called arrogance inflating system. If we can get rid of this, then India is defined around it. I'm sorry. Bollywood movies have tried a lot to explain the same. If we can win this term, then the private army is not only maintained by the politician, but many wealthy donors are there, and people are actually paying so that you can be in jail. So
Thank you. Thank you very much. I know there are many other. I know there are many other questions, but I'm very sorry that we won't be able to take it. But because we are all here to hear Dr. Bibek Devroy, so without any further ado, may I please invite Dr. Bibek Devroy to present his keynote address. So.
Thank you, Ardhaka. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here largely thanks to Maya Daruwala, whom I have known for more years than we'd publicly admit. Let me tell you that it was much before the Prakash Singh judgment. So it tells you how far back our association goes. I'm delighted to be here. There are 6 organizations which have been involved in this exercise, and I know a few of them, not all of them individually. And I'm actually delighted that something like this is being done. One of the basic functions of government anywhere in the world is delivering law and order. That is the reason governments were elected anywhere in the world in the first place. Compared to the extent of scrutiny that is brought to bear on the other 2 organs of state, namely the executive and the legislature, certainly the Union Parliament, as citizens we have been less demanding that the law and order system delivers. And in an indirect democracy like ours, what governments broadly do is in response to what citizens want. For citizens to respond, for that countervailing pressure to happen, you need information, which something like the Access to Justice report does. I'm not very sure, but I suspect it's going to be an annual exercise. Well, there was a gap, but probably because of COVID. And as you've already been told, there are essentially indicators spread across four heads: police, prisons, judiciary, and legal aid. I have a set of points for consideration for future versions of the Access to Justice report. And these are not meant to be, well, they are meant to be criticism. But criticism only incrementally improves anything like this. And I go back to the years when a former colleague of mine named Lavish Bhandari and I began to do an exercise on ranking the states in 1998. Not on these aspects, on other things. And we were slaughtered. By the way, in the process of that, when I used to make presentations at these conclaves of chief ministers, in the first couple of years, I used to make a mistake, which is to say that half the states are below average and everyone resented it. From the third year, I began to say half the states are above average and no one resented it. So this also, I would think, is something that can be incrementally improved. My first set of points is on the statistical methodology that is used. For something like this, the statistical methodology is never very robust. What has it done? Essentially, what it has done is done a maximum minus minimum for normalization, scored it out of 0 and 10, and done equal weighting. And then it says in the main document, not in this handsheet, that we've used equal weighting because equal weighting is not subjective. Now, that's not true. Equal weighting is subjective. And there are objective and sophisticated ways of churning out the weights instead of equal weights, namely something like principal components analysis. Now, what's the point I'm trying to make? The point I'm trying to make is the rankings and the scores can be very sensitive to the weighting and the normalization that I use. Everyone likes rankings. So all of us will be delighted that Karnataka is number 1 and Tamil Nadu is number 2 and Telangana is number 3. Tomorrow the newspapers will carry headlines saying Karnataka is number 1. But when I know that there is this arbitrariness in the statistical part, how much sanctity is there to rank 1 and 2 and 3? How robust is that? Instead, I know that the states belong to certain clusters. So I know that Karnataka in the overall rankings is vastly superior to UP. So should I at all report ranks? Or should I report clusters of states? In any event, I should do a much better job at explaining the statistical methodology. Having done that, you may still decide to go with ranks. But my suggestion would be that perhaps a better idea is to segregate the states not only in terms of large and mid-sized states, but in terms of clusters. The best, ones that are good, the medium ones that are not that good, and the worst, something like that. That, I think, would be a fair statistical way of doing it. The second set of comments that I have is on the face of it. The indicators seem to be very objective, seem to be very reasonable indicators to have. But let's accept that each indicator that we use reflects a value judgment. We are saying that this is good. We are saying that if I fill vacancies in high courts, that's good. Not according to figure 26 in the main report, which shows that there is no correlation whatsoever between filling vacancies and disposal. Now, I'm not disputing this particular indicator. I'm just saying there is a scope for discussion of each of these indicators and figuring out whether it is the best indicator to have. You've looked at budget figures, state budget figures. I read the report. I couldn't figure out whether these were the budget estimates, whether they were the revised estimates, or whether they were the final estimates. Budget estimates, as anyone who has worked with state budgets will tell you, they're meaningless. What is relevant is the revised estimates, if not the final. If I'm comparing state budgetary spend, should I compare it with the overall state budgetary spend or some subset of that? As another example of this, we have a case clearance rate by courts. Rather surprisingly, I don't have a case clearing rate by judges. There is a norm for lower courts, unless I'm wrong. So how do the courts measure up? How do the judges measure up to this? If you're going to argue, let's have more judges, why not have a figure on how many cases a judge clears? Figure that is a case clearance rate for courts. So I would say, take a relook at all of these indicators to see if there are better indicators. Whenever one does an exercise like this, there is a difficulty. One possible option which this avoids, desirably so, is to use subjective responses to questionnaires. That's dangerous territory. What this does is it uses objective data. Now, the problem with doing that is the objective data have to exist. So the question that I'm posing for you, that even if I want to capture all of these, are there alternative indicators or better indicators to capture what you are trying to capture? The third point is, should I be looking at judiciary at all in its entirety? If I am looking at police, prisons, and legal aid, should I be looking only at criminal justice? It is very tempting to do an access to justice report. It's very tempting to have a unified field theory for resolving the justice system. So I'm just flying a kite and I'm asking you, is it better to only focus on the criminal justice part of it, because the rest of it is police, prisons, and legal aid? Or is it better, since 2/3 of the cases, as the judge pointed out, are criminal cases, or is it better, at least initially, to focus only on lower courts? So when I do this report, that does not mean that this is the end of it all, because I will keep refining it if I want to, but at the same time, I need to impart a certain degree of focus. So is it a better idea to just focus on criminal justice and just focus on lower courts to start off with? The last set of comments is what I find somewhat troubling. The general tenor in this is increase the expenditure. That's what most of those variables suggest. That's what much of the argument in the text also suggests. But all expenditure, and the bulk of this is coming from state governments. But all expenditure has opportunity costs, which leads me to a double point. Surely there should be some discussion of what has happened when there has been the incremental expenditure. As an example of that, I mean the fast track courts. There was an additional expenditure that came for the fast track courts through the Finance Commission. And the subsequent Finance Commissions continued. I think what it was the 13th. There's not a single mention of what the fast track court system has delivered and not delivered in the report. That was additional expenditure. If that additional expenditure did not lead to results, then how are you going to convince me that additional expenditure is going to lead to results now? So I think again, in terms of looking at the indicators, it is a good idea to look at things that are linked to output, which Maya mentioned in her comments, but I do not find that adequately reflected in the indicators. Two final points and then I will stop. One is, Home Ministry ranks police stations. Since you're talking about the police, I think it would be good to acknowledge that. It would be good to mention how your indicators differ from the Home Ministry's ones, and the Home Ministry's ones are partly subjective questionnaire, but there are parts which are objective. The filtering that is done is on the basis of objective criteria. So are those criteria different from the criteria that you use? I'm not talking about the questionnaire part. And the last bit, which is the most difficult one to do, but I think it needs to be done to answer the question that Argha posed, is next time you do this report, bring an economist on board. Not me, I'm no longer an economist. Someone else to do the following. Let us do a cause-benefit exercise of an extra rupee spent. Do you want me to spend that extra money on the police, the prisons, or the judiciary, or legal aid, or what? Let us have a cost-benefit ratio. Unless you do that, you will not be able to persuade, whether it is union government, whether it is state government, it is more the latter in this particular case, where the bang for the buck is. You have to tell me what the multiplier effects are of that extra rupee spent so that I can compare it with the opportunity cost of alternative resources. Finally, when you get this report, you will find a national fact sheet and you will find the detailed report. I think the detailed report should have a little bit more in terms of analytical content. A large part of it is a repetition of what is already there in the tables. That's not what we want. A little bit more of analysis. The analysis varies across the chapters. take a look at whether it can be strengthened or not. Let us see if we can have something on what are the best practices. There is slight mention of that, particularly in the context of the police, but not invariably across the chapters. So let us transcend the numbers, the indexing, and the scores a little bit. They help, but with those numbers, one needs to go somewhere, and that messaging perhaps can become a little bit better. Thank you very much, Maya.
Hi, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry about my throat. It's a great honor here on behalf of the India Justice Report to present the vote of thanks. Thank you, Mr. Birek Debroy, sir, for your insights and your suggestions. We'll definitely take them under consideration. Uh, I'd like to also thank our panelists, our trusted collaborators, Common Cause, CSJ, CHRI, Dakshin, Tisprayas, and Vidhi, as well as the co-authors and researchers from these organizations on whose expertise this report relies on. I'd like to also take this opportunity to thank my most immediate colleagues, Rehana and Lakhvinda, without whose support we would not have been able to make this report. For Vale, who has led us so ably over the last 2 years. Yeah. And finally, Maya, walking human rights compass, who has kept our spirits high with immense knowledge and wit. I'd also like to acknowledge How India Lives, our data partners, who have been our partners for over 3 years and countless revisions. Also, huge thanks to Frappe, who've helped us develop our new website. You guys can go check it out at it's live now. So, thanks also to our donors for standing rock solid behind us, and hope they continue to do so. The team at Tata Trusts, Devashish, Nayantara, particularly in the last few weeks for their crucial support. And finally, I'd like to thank all of you who took out your time to be with us here at the release of our third report. We hope you will share our report widely among your circles and use it to augment your own work. And we look forward to seeing you again in discussions and for the next Justice Report. Thank you so much for coming. With all of this? Yeah. So could we have a picture with you? You should go in, Amita. Vale?